It's alive.
It's alive. Yeah, yeah, you're
Great.
alive.
Okay.
Yeah, you're alive. Don't say anything criminal, incriminating,
Incriminating.
criminalizing.
Caramelizing.
Ooh, caramelized onions. Best burger topping. Well,
Agree.
yeah. I
I like
mean,
mushrooms too.
but do you you kind of need like lettuce and a tomato and a pickle. They're like more fundamental to a burger than, well, I don't know actually.
You can have a burger with nothing on
Okay, I wouldn't. You can. I wouldn't.
it. There's this stupid like YouTube short of a guy who ordered a burger from McDonald's and said no anything, just to see what they would do. They just give him a
Why?
burger.
Yeah,
And it was
great.
like no bread, no meat, no lettuce, no tomato.
I'm so glad people are out doing this kind of detective work. It's
Yeah.
very important for our society.
But they wrote a question mark on his receipt.
It's like, why? What's your favorite kind of burger? Like, if you were to make a perfect burger, what's on it?
Well, so I rarely eat beef. So,
So would it be a
uh,
different? Would it not be a beef burger? Would it be a
no,
turkey
so like my,
burger?
my go-to burger is a turkey burger, and then I mash in avocado to add in like extra fat and binding.
Okay.
A couple eggs, seasonings, and then
It's more like a
do you
meatball.
like, well, and then you just put it on a pan and fry it.
See, that's yeah, it's more like a meatball then, isn't it?
Why is it a meatball? You just have to squish it down and then it's flat.
Yeah, but it's got eggs and spices and other stuff in it.
I mean, I guess I always consider hamburger like a form factor, not a
So the burger is the shape, the hockey puck, rather
yeah,
than the what it is. Fair enough.
or the patty is the shape.
That's patty, like a peppermint patty. Is that a hamburger? Does that count?
I don't know.
The important
I don't
questions
know.
here. Thank you all for
Very important
coming. This has
question.
been our stream, and we'll see you next time.
We need to go to Reddit.
God, is a peppermint patty a hamburger? No.
Is a meatball a hamburger if you put it between bread? Is a meatball sub a hamburger?
Ooh, meatball subs are good. That's something I also haven't had in a long time. Anyways, hi,
Hi,
Ethan. Where are you? You're not at home.
I'm in Colorado.
Colorado.
I'm
How is it?
I'm currently a digital nomad, so I'm all over the place. I left home like 6 weeks ago, and I've been traveling all over the East Coast, and now I'm in Colorado and going skiing, and then next month gonna head to Mexico.
Yay.
Hmm.
I've been to Mexico before.
Once or twice.
Yeah. Are you excited for your Mexico trip?
I am. I have to plan it. That's kind of. I feel like I have to plan it before I can get excited about it.
Yes, you should do that. I've been planning my Euro trip with Lamont,
Hmm.
and it helps to kind of know what you're doing, where you're going.
Yeah.
He's dragging me to, oh, I can't say where actually. He doesn't want anybody to know.
Uh-oh. It's a secret.
Yeah. He's he's got most people don't really care what his language he's like his secret language that he's learning, but he's got a couple of people that really do want to know and he
Hmm.
enjoys messing with them. Like like deliberately misleading them. In one of his recent videos, he like held up a book as if he was like reading it and then blurted out. Um, just even though it was not, it was just like it was like a random Eastern European language that he's not learning.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just did that to throw one person off. It was one person in my comments that I want to throw off. Oh, hello, sir. Would you like to come up? Would you like to come join the stream? Yeah. Yeah. Why are you all wet? He's all wet for some reason.
That's not a
It's
good
not
sign.
raining. He's a weird cat in the aspect that he likes water and rain and stuff. And I
My
turn,
cat growing up used to sleep in the sink
yeah,
and would not move until you turn the water on. And then she would also stand like on the top of the shower door and like play with the water.
that's funny.
And
He
she would
will
also like
just
sit
go
on the
into the
counter.
shower.
Yeah. She would also sit next to the sink and meow at you until you turn the water on for her.
This guy, his favorite way to drink water is out of an old like mayonnaise glass that I fill with water and have to keep near the sink. But if it's not full enough, he'll just knock it over. So I have to keep it in the sink, and every so often I'll forget to, and I'll wake up in the morning, there's just water everywhere.
Maybe that's why he's
Because
wet.
he did, maybe. What were you doing? Whatever. Um,
Qué travieso.
that's him. It's un jengibrecito. He's my hermoso rey perfecto. Here he is. Meow. Okay, sorry. Cats aside. We don't have very many questions from the Discord server today. So if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We will get to them pretty likely. Or if you just want to.
I feel like there were a bunch of questions from the last chat that we didn't get to. Did we save those?
Yes, but most of them we've answered before. Like one of them, we just have a video on that from a couple months ago. So
Okay.
I was like, we don't need to get into that one. And so I figured might as well take questions from chat since those people are here as well. But,
yeah, absolutely.
So the first question here comes from Fatima, and they ask, is immersion enough to reach fluency? And they ask, is it true that if I immerse myself in active listening for a language I can understand, eventually I will be outputting naturally? And I think is a sort of a fundamental, almost philosophical question for a lot of people that, and a lot of nuance gets missed because it is seen as like an all or nothing question or a, yeah. You want to get into it?
My immediate answer is no, it will not work. So if you think about people say, oh, babies immerse and they have an opportunity to just like learn through immersion and then they start speaking. But that doesn't take into account the fact that they are constantly having reinforcement and correction for understanding and also for speaking. And when they start speaking, they then get corrected for speaking. So there's no real model in human behavior for being able to do something purely through a passive exercise without any sort of interaction or feedback. So I think the thing that we really focus on is what is the feedback loop for learning?
Exactly.
Because if there is no feedback loop, then you can't really learn because you can't correct yourself. So if you're just sitting and watching TV, you're just listening to podcasts and you're not thinking about it, you're not looking up words, you're not checking to see what people mean, and you're not talking to somebody who can then like simplify or explain or show you with other materials, there is no feedback loop. There's no opportunity for you to know whether what you understood is correct or not. And without that feedback loop, your brain can't develop the predictive pathways in order to be able to understand something at a subconscious level and be able to use it at a subconscious level. So immersion by itself, without any support or tooling or human intervention, is I don't think there's any way that would yield the results you're looking for.
For understanding specifically, you can get a feedback loop with just like pretty simple, sort of almost subconscious activities of like, did I understand this? Yes or no? Am I understanding this? Am I getting it? But that doesn't exactly translate into output as well. Like that, which their specific question is like, if you do a lot of active listening in things that you understand, will you just be able to output naturally? And you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah.
So there are some people who have demonstrated the ability to go straight from I can completely understand this to I can actually create full, complete sentences. And they're not perfect, but there are some people who have demonstrated a decent ability on the first attempt speaking. I know of at least 3 cases of people who were able to have full conversations the first time they tried to speak. That being said, the vast majority of the learners in our community have not demonstrated that ability. And it's not clear whether that's because they didn't have a good enough level or because their level was so good that their um, their speaking ability, uh, their understanding was so good that they could tell when they were saying things poorly. And in my case, when I speak, I have a little voice in my head that is constantly correcting what I'm saying.
A little Ethan.
Little, or what Krashen called the monitor, I believe is the monitor hypothesis, um,
It's not as much
where
fun though.
no, you get things popping out of your subconscious into your conscious brain, ready to say, and then you have a little intellectual process that goes through and is like, is this actually the right thing to say? Um, and when you have a very high level of comprehension and a very low level of output, that's a big blocker because you can hear every mistake that you're making, and it's an interruption in the ability to get some sort of flow. Um, so one of the things that we focus on with new outputters is this level of comfort of being able to speak without that monitor interrupting you, and that takes 25 to 50 hours before you can get that level of comfort with it. And at that point, you're still not speaking perfectly. You're not 100% correct because you haven't actually focused on trying to correct all those things, but really just focusing in on that comfort in order to bypass that monitor that's constantly interrupting your speaking thought process.
Yeah, and there's a similar thing as well in the um, like actual comprehension and input side of things, where it does really help to use tools to challenge yourself and to double check meaning, to look at words, to understand things. That is a very common question in the Spanish server because a lot of people use almost exclusively German Spanish and then
Yep.
find themselves with certain issues or slow progress because they're not necessarily getting that feedback loop in the way that they should. And they often will go to the things that are easy or artificially slower and don't actually make the jump to really pushing themselves to make progress again.
Yeah, and the hypothesis with dreaming Spanish isn't wrong. Like the comprehensible input that they provide is meant to provide a feedback loop because when they say
Right.
something, it corresponds to what's being visually shown. So you have an opportunity to evaluate whether you understood the thing based on the context that that thing is set in.
But that also assumes that you are doing the right sort of mental exercise
Yeah,
to evaluate your understanding yourself.
yes, there's an evaluation process, and it's also, I would argue, much slower. There's plenty of success cases with dreaming Spanish, but ones that are more pure, they take an enormous amount of time. You're talking like 8 hours a day of dreaming Spanish for a year.
It also seems to be very dependent on the person doing
Yeah.
it. Some people have way more success than others. Um, so, kid. Cool. So hopefully that answers
So,
your question. Thank you
in
for it.
summary, no, but kind of.
Great answer. Great summary. Thank you. Um, got a question here from Reflector. Hi guys, do you think it's better to use graded readers as at an intermediate stage, or to work with native level content and make it comprehensible by looking up words?
Either is fine. I think graded readers are a great tool, especially if you can get an audiobook with them. They're
Absolutely.
perfect for intermediate learners. Um, the lookups and the tools that you use for native content are meant to force something to be comprehensible, and graded readers do that for you essentially
Hmm.
by only selecting things that are comprehensible. The worry and the challenge is that many learners get stuck in this beginner intermediate plateau where they're good enough for graded readers, but moving to native content is very challenging and very
Or scary.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you have to develop a whole new tool set and a whole new level of stamina and endurance to deal with that ambiguity and with that difficulty. And if you're only using graded readers for a long time, um, you never develop those meta level skills that allow you to engage with native content. So I would say graded readers are great, but eventually you need to move on to native content. And don't be surprised if there's a big difficulty gap between those two things, and your understanding is going to plummet. you're going to have to develop all sorts of new tools or new techniques in order and strategies for being able to understand that native content. And so, yeah.
This is another thing that's actually pretty common with Dreaming Spanish learners, is that they'll be doing advanced Dreaming Spanish videos, but then really struggle to make the jump to native, full-on native content, just like for native Spanish speakers, because there is a difference, and it's not even necessarily in like difficulty, it's just style and speed and other things that they probably could do, but it is really uncomfortable and can be difficult to make that switch.
Yeah. And if you've done a comprehensible input approach from the beginning or a graded reader approach from the beginning, you never learned the tools for dealing with a situation in which you don't understand. And I think that's the biggest issue that I have with Dreaming Spanish, because he's like, don't do lookups, don't use tools. But as a result, you never learn the meta level skills for dealing with things that are extremely difficult and beyond your capacity.
Right.
And that causes people to get stuck.
But for your question specifically, I would also say do what is enjoyable to you. If you enjoy graded readers and understanding a lot more learning that way, do that. If you want to immerse in TV shows, which is like a preference of mine, do that. You learn how to do that and get good at that.
Yeah, both of them are completely legitimate approaches. Both of them work. You should do the one that is most interesting and enjoyable to you.
Cool. Thank you for the question, Reflector.
Reflector. Great name.
Great name. And with a K instead of a C.
Oh,
Reflector.
super cool.
Yeah. Incredible. And then Pablo says, Nya.
Yeah.
Just Enye. That's it.
Reflector with a K reminds me of Mode Selector, which was this like techno band that I used to listen to in college. It's like super epic techno songs.
Why does the name Reflector remind you of that?
Because Mode Selector had a K.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Next question here comes from Mohammed, and they ask, if I'm planning to get a B2 certificate in German and I'm using immersion and comprehensible input, how many hours should I have studied if I want to be able to pass the test? They also follow up with, and should I study grammar from the get-go or wait until I'm preparing for the test?
Ben, you've actually taken B2 tests before. I've only taken practice
The German
tests,
one,
so
actually.
literally the German one.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how long it'll take to get to a B2 level in German with just immersion, but taking tests is very different from like becoming fluent in like a conversational way. Like somebody else down here responded is that they also have a B2 certificate in German, but have problems with daily conversation. There are just different skills that you need to do if you want to pass a B2 versus have a conversation. To pass the B, like a lot of the exams, you need just a certain level, and then it's like basically pass fail. You need a certain level in different things. And so if you are okay at doing each of these different things, you're probably going to pass. Like the people that I took the test with were not super, I mean, none of us are really that good, honestly. But when I called to try to get my results early, they were like, we don't have them ready yet, but I'll tell you, nobody failed. I don't know exactly how well you did, but nobody failed. And a lot of the people were not that good and had a very traditional base of German. I remember that I was much worse at like the writing and grammar specificity, but I could actually just speak and have a conversation. And the conversation part was in like with a pair, and the other person was way lower level of speaking. But it's like it doesn't really matter if you can get some ideas across and you're fairly accurate. That's really all they're looking for. And so to studying for the test is a lot more important than being good at the language. However, likely if you're trying to get a B2, you want to use German in some professional or educational capacity, in which case you should try to be good, because it is a lot more useful to be actually fluent in the language rather than just have the certificate, because just having a certificate doesn't mean much at all. So to wrap up my rambling, focus on getting a good base in German, enjoying the language, learning how to use it, and then when you're ready to study for the test, study the things for the test. Either go with an actual tutor for the test, look at practice tests, do specific exercises, learn the specific grammar rules that you should know for that level, and that kind of thing. But I would not worry about it until 3 to 6 months before you plan to actually take the test. And if you've done enough immersion at that point, and you actually feel comfortable watching daily content, having basic conversations, and know like the basic grammar rules, you're going to be fine, I think. B2 is really not that hard.
I'd say if you want some like concrete metrics here, I would probably say 4,000 words in uh, comprehension that you
Mm-hmm.
can understand, and then 2,000 words and be able to speak. 2,000 most common. Uh, Good reading comprehension. Reading is a lot of these tests. Listening comprehension is also a bigger portion of these tests. I've only done the practice tests for like the C1 and C2, and the listening comprehension there is like very challenging because they add all sorts of noise and like record things in giant auditoriums. My guess is that the B2 is easier. Um, and then the speaking portion, like as Ben said, you do need to be able to like speak and have a conversation. Um, and the way all these tests are structured is, as Ben said, each of the different sections, you have to get a certain point threshold. And as long as you get a point threshold in all of the sections, you're good. So it's not like you can't just like 100% bomb one of them, but you don't need to like master any single one of them. Um, and then there's this other piece, at least on the Spanish one, where you have to get a certain threshold of all of the points added together. Um, but yeah, so 4,000 passive vocabulary, 2,000 active vocabulary, good reading comprehension, decent listening comprehension, and being able to like express yourself at a basic level, and you should be fine.
Somebody asked for the cat to be on camera, so I'm obliging. Obliging them?
Sorry, I keep coughing. I had COVID for a week and a half last or 2 weeks ago, and I've just been coughing forever since. So,
It's better than on our meetings because you don't mute, but the system tries to mute you, and so it just kind of sounds like it's just like disconcerting to hear those coughs.
yeah, it's also disconcerting to be coughing.
Yeah, it's not fun. But hopefully this helps, Mohammed. We got a question here from Death Note that says, if I'm in phase 3, do I need to have a language parent, and do shadowing?
Have we not ripped shadowing out of stage 3?
Uh, when we talk about it, yes, I think it's probably still in the roadmap, honestly.
We should probably edit that. We should probably rip shadowing out.
Yeah.
As it
We
turns out,
actually,
shadowing is really hard. And it's not just a hard language learning skill. Like it's just a hard skill generally. Trying to do it in your native language is also really hard. So we have removed shadowing as a recommendation from stage 3. We do keep it in stage 4, but you do not need to do shadowing.
yeah, and it's really hard, but also it seems to be just about as useful or even not as useful as chorusing. Like chorusing does a similar thing, especially for stage 3 when you're just trying to get the rhythm and flow. And so recommending people do chorusing is one, a lot more approachable and seems to be just as helpful. It is
Yeah,
not
I
as
think there
impossible.
might be a use for shadowing for getting like long form intonation across sentences. Um, but that remains to be
I would
seen.
just chorus longer sentences though, because like the idea of trying to get a whole sentence live, I just feel like you're just dividing your attention so much.
Fair.
But
Yeah.
um,
But
yeah,
yeah, chorusing is
potentially
great. You should do chorusing.
do
To
chorusing.
answer your question about language parent, um, I think this kind of depends on the individual. I do think it's beneficial if you can find a language parent that you enjoy. I personally really struggle with language parents. I've worked through a couple different ones. I just get bored so fast of their content. And boredom is the enemy
Yeah,
of progress. So um, I do think it is valuable to try and imitate a specific person or a specific accent. Rather, you don't want to be like switching imitation across like many different accents or dialects.
hmm,
But I don't think you need to have a single language parent.
agreed. Yeah, you could bounce between them, but it is I also think it's helpful if they at least have a similar dialect or accent, because what you also don't really want is to like just be totally mixing very different dialects. Not a huge problem for, well, I mean, a lot of languages have very different dialects. Like it just sounds weird if like I've known a couple of people that have learned English and just have a subset of words they pronounce British and some words they pronounce American, and it's just weird.
Yeah.
It's just kind of
That's what I have in
strange.
Spanish. Like people are
Yeah.
always confused. Like, where the hell are you from? I'm like, I'm from California.
Yeah.
But like, what your accent is like? It sounds Spanish, but it's like uh, more of like a neutral South American Spanish. And then you like throw random like Colombian words in there, and it's like
Like, yep, that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what it
that's
is.
exactly what happens because I immersed with things from all over the world and just mix it all together in my head like a blender.
Ew.
It's just a Spanish smoothie.
What would that taste like?
Not great. It's just birria.
Yeah. Another question from Reflector. And they asked us if we've seen a Refold review from Evil DEA. I don't know how to
I
say
have
that
not.
name. Somebody told me about it, I
Okay.
think. Um, and they said it was, but it was like it was a long video. So I was like, can you just give me the TLDR? I don't want to watch this.
Hmm.
They're like, yeah, they agreed on most things except for putting off speaking. And it seemed like they interpreted it, but based on what somebody else told me, about more like the militant you cannot speak sort of
Hmm.
stance, which we don't really have. And then
Yeah.
the follow up question from Reflector was like, what's the harm in doing listening repeat exercises? And so I think that there's definitely still we are not clear enough about what we mean by don't speak. But the thing that we really try to say is like, you don't want to be putting your thoughts and creating new language because it can be very psychologically difficult and painful and annoying and difficult, and it's not very effective. But
I
like,
think there's
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I think there's two different issues and two different confusions going on. Um, First is what is the definition of speaking? And this person asked, what's the harm in listening and repeat exercise? Like, absolutely nothing. Go do them. Like, we don't consider that speaking.
Exactly.
When we talk about speaking, we're only talking about the ideation to words. And the so in terms of what we are concerned about and why we delay these things, the first is your ear adapted to the language so that you can hear when you're making mistakes? And are you phrasing things the way that a native would phrase them, or are you phrasing things the way that you would phrase them in your native language, then translated? And so the ear aspect that gets addressed relatively early in our model because we recommend reading and listening together. We do recommend sound study, listening and repeat exercises, chorusing. Those are all done well before you start speaking.
Hmm.
The phrasing things the way that a native would is something that takes a lot longer because you have to see an enormous amount of the language to see the way that natives speak, and you need to engage with native content, not learner content, not comprehensible input. You need to see and hear how does a native express this idea, because it is often not what you would see in a textbook. It is not what you would immediately translate. Like there's one yesterday that I saw where a girl was talking about her older sister, and she was describing like the age gap, and the way she described it was nos llevamos 9 años, and that is a completely different way to express that idea than in English. In
Hmm.
English, you would say she's 9 years older than me, but in Spanish, the direct translation is we carry together 9 years.
Yeah, you really can't directly translate it.
Yeah, and so like there's no way that you would know that learning from a textbook or trying to speak early on. The only way you know that is if you've engaged with the language enough to hear that. And there are tens of thousands of those things.
Yeah, my example that I learned a couple of months ago was a friend was talking about their cats. She's like, "Yeah, tengo tres gatos," and then the other person was like, "Oh, y todos son gatos? And I was like, the fuck kind of question is that? Like, of course they're all cats. But then she's like, no, dos son gatos y una gata. I was like, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I just, and like, it was super natural for them. It's like, that's how you ask basically that in Spanish. And I was just like, oh, of course. But I was like,
Yeah.
why do you, no, what's a dog? But like, it's just like, oh yeah, there's these things that you just have to kind of be exposed to and understand. This is the way that it is said, rather than like, this is what it means, or how do you say this? It's like, this is how it is said. And that just takes a lot of exposure, right? You're not going to come across people asking such or saying such specific things without a whole heck of a lot of time in the language.
And then I'd say there's a third reason actually why we delay speaking, and that's just because speaking is hard. And in the early phases, trying to take your, native ideas and native words and convert them into the target language is incredibly mentally intensive. And
you feel so dumb.
and you feel so dumb because the things that are popping into your head, like the experience of this is, if you're a new learner trying to speak English and you're an English native speaker, English pops into your head and then you have to convert it to Spanish or whatever target language you're doing. Whereas speaking after you can understand the language is, the language will pop into your head and it may not be right and you may have to manipulate it, but at least it's coming out in the language. And that reduces the mental load of speaking so much and makes it so much more enjoyable. And because you're at a level where you can understand very easily and with a low level of energy, you don't have to divide your attention, or rather, you can focus all of your attention on speaking because understanding is so easy.
That's exactly what I mentioned with like crosstalk, where it's like when you go to have a conversation in the target language, you have to do two things. You have to understand and you have to speak. And if you are trying to do both at the same time, that is way harder than doing one. Like with crosstalk, first you practice the understanding part, the receptive side of conversations. Then you jump into the productive side of conversations of speaking. You can't really do it the other way around because that would be really weird. And so that's why crosstalk is just so powerful for learning to have conversations with people.
Yeah, because as you get better at any of these skills, the energy requirement and the attention and focus required diminishes and reduces. And so if you dedicate 100% of your attention to understanding first, so that it reduces the energy load of that activity, then when you start to speak, you can dedicate 90% of your time and attention to speaking rather than a 50-50 split.
Yeah, precisely. Cool. Thank you for that question. I forget who asked it at this point.
Yeah, but we really do need to clarify a lot of this stuff because
Yeah.
there are still people online complaining about this specific issue. And I feel like once we explain it, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
We're working on clarity
I know.
and stuff like that. It's yeah.
We'll figure it out soon.
Will we do more videos with Mr. Salas? Yes. In fact, the second German video, he is ignoring me about our meeting for it. You go to his comment section. I'm ready to record, but I was like, hey, you want to do a follow up? Yeah, and he didn't bring a camera.
Yeah.
And so I was like, your job is to be a YouTuber. It's like, why didn't you bring a camera? But he texted me the other day. He's like, got a camera now. And I'm like, okay, great. When do you want to record? That was yesterday. Never mind. He's
okay.
Okay. No, I thought it was like 2 or 3 days ago.
A little bit more.
Yeah. Sorry. I rescind my shade throwing. I rescind my shade.
But the answer is yes. We do lots of videos with him.
Not really where we appear in them. Like.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, that's a good
point. But I think I would like to.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple months, once I'm out of code land.
Yeah.
Lift my head up for a month. And
you can stop immersing in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Lucas has a question. Very important question.
Okay.
Would you guys trade your ability to speak English for the ability to speak fluently in 20 other languages of your choice at a native level, and you can't relearn English?
Oof.
Just choose Scots as one of them.
Um, Probably not,
Yeah,
because
I wouldn't either.
I all the people that I know talk to, like, all my friends, all my family, like I'm essentially cutting off all ties to them if I do that. Though nowadays with translation materials, I suppose you could do that, but
Do you really want to talk to your family
no,
through Google Translate?
I really don't.
Like, translate my Javanese to English, please. And it's like
Um,
I also really like English. I think it's an interesting language. I
Canceled.
sorry,
You're not allowed to like English.
not allowed. And a lot of English language media, while their translations do exist, I also really like to understand the subtleties. And yeah, I don't know. I have
Yeah,
no
I mean,
interest in.
if I couldn't watch any English content or read any English Wikipedia, that would like cut off so much of my information supply. Because Wikipedia, even though it is translated in a lot of languages, oftentimes the translated articles are way less detailed than the English ones. I notice this a lot with Spanish articles, where I'll start on the Spanish one. I'm like, this doesn't seem detailed enough, and I'll switch to the English one, and it's like, oh,
Boom,
that's
it
why.
loads.
Yeah.
Another 5 MB. It's like, jeez. Yep.
So
So, no. And like, I have no interest in speaking 20 languages. That's so many. Um, I want to keep learning languages, but I don't necessarily want to, like, 20 is a lot. Um, I'm, I'm, I'm not a Pokemon collect 'em all kind of guy. I don't think.
yeah, would be cool though. 20 at like
Well,
native level
I
fluency.
mean, what in 20 would you choose? Like, I feel like the last like
Beyond
five,
10, I'm
you'd
not
be
even
like,
sure.
you just roll dice, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'll take, I don't know, West Punjabi. I don't know. Yeah.
Can I choose a language that is like extinct that nobody else knows how to speak? Because then I could
Ooh.
become very valuable for like
Yeah.
archaeology.
Can you choose fictional languages?
I mean,
Could you become natively fluent in that the Arrival alien language that
yeah,
allows you to travel in time?
that'd be neat. I thought you were gonna
Anyways,
say Klingon.
yeah, that's my reason for going into it. Okay. Next question here
Okay.
from Bosk Bucha. Boske Bucha,
Boston,
maybe? Because I mean,
not Boss
yeah,
kombucha.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe. Should sentence mining come after a strong grasp of vocabulary? If so, how many words understood or spoken? And what about grammar practice, such as close deletion? Should that come before strong vocab?
We generally recommend sentence mining after 2,000 words from a pre-made deck. That gives you a solid enough foundation to find sentences in your content that have one unknown word in it, which is kind of a requirement for sentence mining.
Hmm.
You can do it much earlier if you're using graded content or easier content. But even still, the first 2,000 most common words in the language are pretty standard. There's no real specificity after beyond or before that point. So it's kind of a waste of time to do sentence mining, in my opinion. Though some people prefer it because they have a much stronger emotional connection to it, and that allows them to remember it better.
I also
But
did it with check because there wasn't a great 1K deck or 2K deck.
sure,
So
yeah, if you
yeah,
don't have an option for learning the initial vocabulary, then like yeah, sentence mining is the first place to start.
yeah, I think of it as basic vocab, sentence mining, extensive reading, potentially sentence mining again after that. And then for grammar stuff, the way we sort of we think about it is like basic grammar priming. So getting just when you look at a sentence, it's not like just a random order of random words. Like there's some sense to it. Then a lot of immersion and figuring out the patterns that way, and then actually doing some deeper dives into the grammar study so that you can a lot like you would do if you take an English class where like your teacher tells you rules and be like, that's not how you spell that, or like you should probably not do it that way or whatever, things like that. And then potentially doing things like close deletion, checking your conjugations, declensions, that kind of thing, especially if they're abstract or really difficult. But definitely vocab is a priority
Yeah,
before grammar.
vocab definitely a priority. Um, there's grammar is a very long tail process because there are the like core grammar pieces that you kind of need in order to understand things, and then there are the grammar pieces that you need in order to speak correctly. And I'd say those are two very different sets of things. And one of those is relatively small, and the other one is very big.
There's also the grammar pieces you need to be able to write at a like college educated level,
Yeah,
which is not the same as speaking.
right.
There are plenty of things
So
that we do in spoken English that are wrong.
yeah, so grammar for comprehension, you should be able to get the initial understanding of grammar relatively fast. We don't recommend doing a huge amount of grammar study because you can basically get the basic rule set uh, within just 10 hours of study, and
It's
that's
essentially
enough.
identifying common patterns and going, okay, this isn't weird.
Yeah, so it's like words are structured this way and are manipulated this way in these different contexts for these different reasons, and here's how a sentence fits together. Grammar is the glue that holds the vocabulary together. Um, but you don't need to know every single piece of grammar in order to understand a sentence. Oftentimes, there's a bunch of grammar in there that's very superfluous, um, just because the way things are. Grammar or writing is often there's a lot of redundant information in it. The In terms of actually being able to use the grammar, I'd say that's where a lot of the grammar study and the closed cards become very useful. Like Ben has been going through this process with Czech right now because there's a very complicated. It's not
Noun,
conjugations. What do you call them?
declensions.
Declensions. Yeah. There's a very complicated pattern for doing those things, and there's lots of exceptions. And so he's been mapping out like all of these crazy declension charts, and like doing these. Do you want to talk about it actually?
Yeah, so and the way that I'm trying to do it is not by memorizing necessarily, but by really trying to map my understanding knowledge onto these patterns and trying to see them better and to figure out my weaknesses. And so like I've discovered various things that like I don't understand super well, that I don't quite grasp, and then I dive into that a little bit more, going, okay, how do I identify the gender of a noun? And then I look into it and go, it's actually not that bad. I can map it out myself. It's a because with Czech nouns you can identify the gender in like 95% of cases just by looking at the end of the word, but you have to know the kind of complicated flowchart, and you also have to understand the words. And so I did that a little bit, not even probably a couple hours on it. And my ability to both understand the nouns and the cases and kind of extrapolate them to their base form has improved a lot. But also my ability to use them and identify them has also improved a lot with just a little bit of study, but only because I already understood everything. And I saw this with Spanish as well. I took a couple of grammar sort of sessions with a tutor, and the fact that there were zero new words in the entire conversation, the entire lesson, and that I understood everything he said and everything that was written perfectly, but he could be like, yeah, so this is what is going on here. I go, oh, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And again, it's sort of like that when you, with the speaking, when we were talking about, it's like you're trying to both understand the thing and figure out the grammar concept in your brain. It can be really difficult because you're trying to do essentially two different things. But if you got that understanding down and you're just focusing on like going, okay, what's happening in the sentence and why does it mean that? It's a lot more approachable. And so doing things, I prefer to do, instead of like close cards, I prefer to do like sort of deep dives. I've actually written a grammar primer for Czech with basically all of the different things that I've learned about or studied, and then write out a version of it, come up with some examples, and then talk about it with a tutor. And that really helps me to wrap my head around concepts which look complicated and weird, but really aren't that bad. Like I complain about it a lot, but also like languages just are weird. Like I don't really know what else to say. And so kind of being okay with that weirdness, getting used to the patterns, and then going out and immersing and hearing it and seeing it a bunch of times really helps it sink in, I think.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, you
Yeah.
need a certain amount of grammar in order to understand, and that's a relatively small amount of grammar. And then once you have a foundation and understanding, grammar study becomes much easier for the purpose of output, and getting all of those, that long tail of hundreds or even thousands of like small little things that you have to figure out.
Mhm.
So we would just say divide it into two different activities. There is comprehension grammar and there is production grammar. And comprehension grammar we recommend doing relatively early on with just the basics. And then production grammar we recommend waiting until you're ready to speak
Mhm.
and until you already are able to speak.
Yeah. After you're relatively comfortable, just like getting the words out there, and that your monitor is quieter, then you can start to focus on grammar. Because if you try to do it first, it makes speaking even harder and more frustrating. And yeah, so
Yeah,
good.
you got to get that level of comfort with speaking because there's a lot of like mental and psychological challenges that come along with that. But then once you can do that fluidly, then you move on to the accuracy of like, okay, am I actually saying the right things at the right time in the right way?
Cool. Thank you for the question. Next question here from Saulki. Despite having a B2 certificate in German, I started using Refold to improve my speaking skills. Is this effective? Yeah, that's exactly what I did, actually. I took German in school for 4 or 5 years. I did a little bit of self study and I passed the B2. Then I left it for like 7 years. And I came back a couple months ago to restart German using a lot more immersion methods. One, I had remembered a lot more than I thought I had, but it also helped me a lot to, and this is in the videos about it, but I enjoyed the language again. I'm understanding things just fine. I have better tools and techniques to understand and learn more in a more fun and engaging way. And then I only spoke for like 90 minutes, less than 2 hours, I think, in total. Yeah. And it really helped. Like I got basically back to where I stopped, um, 7 years ago in 70 hours of immersion plus a couple hours of speaking. And so it does help if you are more familiar with the language and you get more phrases and you have that flow and rhythm just in your brain, because like that's what you really use when you're speaking. Not your Anki cards, not your memorized phrases, but like what did I hear in that video that I watched? How does this person intone that question to make it clearer? Things like that.
Yeah, what I would say is that you can get to B2 through traditional methods. It's very hard to get past B2 just with traditional methods. Um, at the end of the day, all roads lead to immersion. Like you can't get to C1 and C2 unless you're consuming native content. It's a requirement for those tests. And so, the Refold premise is that you should start doing that early on. The traditional model is you start doing that after B2, essentially. Um, so,
Or never.
or, I mean, if you want to get to a high level, like
Yeah.
they will force
Right.
you to start reading,
Sure,
like
sure, sure.
classic literature, like especially the C2 test in Spanish. Reading classic literature helps because they start to do these like what sounds better. It's like you have three options and like two of them are correct, one of them's incorrect, and the two ones that are correct, one of them sounds better. And the only reason you know it sounds better is because you've read it a bunch of times.
Yeah, I
Um,
was looking at a practice test and it was like asking questions about poetry. I'm
yeah.
like, bro, I don't read poetry in English.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you want me to do what?
Yeah. Anyway, so it's impossible
Yeah,
to pass those tests without
that's true.
doing uh, content consumption and immersion in the media of the language. So yes, it's absolutely effective. And then I'd also say the scale is really important to understand. The way the CEFR test is set up is that it's exponential. So every level is double the previous level in terms of vocabulary and ability level. Vocabulary is the easy one to target, but the
I do want to
B2 test,
clarify,
yeah,
they have a B2 already. They just want to get better at German now. I
right.
don't think they care about the tests. They want to be able to be a good German user,
Oh, okay.
I think.
Well, in that case, a native German speaker is going to know between 20 and 30,000 words passively and is going to be able to actively use around 10,000 of those. And a B2 CEFR guarantees you like about 3 to 4,000 of passive vocabulary. So the scale, you're basically at like one third to one fourth to one third of a native speaker. So everything that we teach is about how do you bridge the gap from that level of 3,000 passive words to 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000 passive words, because that's when you really excel and become a high level speaker in the language on par with a native speaker. You really have to.
It's not just about vocabulary. There's other things in there as
No,
well, but
there's tons of different like sub skills, but vocabulary is the very easy one because there's actual number around it,
yeah.
as long as we define vocabulary correctly. But it's just meant to show a sense of scale of what you're trying to, in order to be a very good speaker in a language that is able to. It's very distracting.
Sorry. But he's so cute. Look at him.
It's very cute.
His little feetsies. His little footsies. Sorry. Oh, you stink. As you would.
Yes. So in order to become very good at a language, you have to spend a lot of time with it. You have to know a lot about the language. You have to hear a lot of different things in the language. And all of those things contribute to becoming a better speaker because it, A, makes the energy requirements much, much lower. It provides you with much more subconscious understanding and be able to produce the language at a subconscious level. So yes, to answer your question, yes, the Refold method will help you.
Good question. Thank you. Dude, in my Spanish class, the teacher has such a bad American accent and he's making us output early. Not a question, but I wanted to read that out loud. Yeah, that's really common.
Yeah.
I would say just pick up what you can, immerse at home. Don't worry about your speaking. When you don't have to speak, don't worry about it too much. You'll get a better accent than them, almost guaranteed, if you immerse enough.
Yeah. There's
You can rub it in their
one
face.
high schooler that sent us a message at one point
Mm-hmm.
because he had been, he was in a Spanish class and obviously had to output early. And then he was doing like Refold in his free time. And he did his final presentation. And the teacher was like, "You are by far the best Spanish student I've ever had. Like, that was the best presentation ever in my entire like teaching career." So don't get too disheartened by it. Like, you could definitely work through it. Like, your class is probably only at what, an hour a day. So still
Probably
plenty
like
of
45 minutes twice a week or something.
or that. But you can spend a lot more than that on the immersion side, and you'll pretty quickly be able to surpass everybody else in your class.
And
Probably your teacher, it sounds like.
not only is that, I think, a good goal, but also can be very rewarding outside of school. You can have friends and experiences in different languages, and assuming that you are in the US since they have an American accent, it's also a very widely spoken language in the US, and you'll have a lot of doors opened and different friends that you can have. And so, especially if this is high school and not like university, you have a very long time to get a very good level that can be very useful. So the word very, very many times. But I am very passionate about this very important topic.
On that topic, one of the things that I've been noticing recently is with just like the past 2 months of travel, is I feel like I hear Spanish as much as I hear English. And I've been in like 10 different cities and like 10 different places, and it is ubiquitous. It is everywhere.
There's so many. It's like Spanish language in the US. Speaking of English Wikipedia. 43.4 million speakers.
There's
It's like an eighth of the U.S. population or something like that.
mhm,
And in a lot of places, especially cities, it is a higher.
much
Oh
higher.
wait, yeah, and there's also like this estimates count up to 60 million. Yeah, it says 13.7% is from U.S. Census data. So
So, two small anecdotes. I went to a like a carnival a couple years ago, and it was outside of San Francisco, and I swear 75% of the people there were speaking Spanish. Not just the people
Yeah,
working, like
You're in
all of the
California.
people there.
Yeah.
And then the other anecdote is I was traveling a couple years ago for a couple different friends' weddings. And in the cities, I was hearing Spanish. I'm like, that's normal. And then one of my friends got married in this tiny little town in, I think it was Vermont. And I was surprised to be walking to the venue and I hear like reggaeton playing out of somebody's backyard where they're having a barbecue and like yelling at each other in Spanish. It's like this is a town of maybe 100 people.
That's funny. It's yeah, it's common, it's useful, and it's a cool language. Like
Yeah,
there's also it's very widely spoken, so there's a lot of very different stuff to do, basically.
totally.
We only have a couple more questions here.
We've only got a couple more minutes here, so
Tripyok asks, what kind of input do you recommend when you're ready to speak in English? I feel like most videos are easy, including ones by natives. Whatever you enjoy and pushes you further. So if it's TV shows, movies, harder YouTube videos, definitely search out. But it's not bad if things are easy, unless you're doing things that are too easy for you, that you should be doing harder things.
yeah, I will say, and we've been talking a little bit about this, is pre-scripted videos or scripted videos
Oh
are
yeah.
much easier to understand than non-scripted videos. And there's a lot of verbal tics and verbal behavior that you don't hear in a scripted video. So,
Uh,
what?
like what? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, like, what? Yeah.
What did you say?
So, um, the one that I
Sorry,
always
I
go
cut you
to
off.
is one-on-one podcasts are really good for hearing people speak in their natural rhythms, um, and in their natural like mode of speaking. So, if you enjoy that media, that's a good one to go to. Find a couple podcasters that you enjoy talk or enjoy listening to, and use them as your model for how to actually speak the language.
There's a lot of podcasts out there,
There's
so you're gonna have
so many podcasts. You can
plenty
find
of
any
opportunities.
topic, and if you don't like that one, I'm guarantee you can find the same topic from a different podcaster.
And then just to wrap up the last question here from Magnets with two Z's. I understand Polish when I hear it, but it feels like it goes in one ear and out the other. And in conversations, I know what is said, but I can't recall after. Is
Yeah,
this normal? Any fixes?
it is normal. Um,
Oh, so
Matt had this like analogy where like you hear something and your brain it's like a piece of candy and your brain like unwraps it immediately and like gets to the meat of it and then converts that into thought.
yeah, totally. But my question is also, do you just forget what the conversation was about afterwards? Because they say they can't recall it after. So I'm not sure if they mean like they can't recall the conversation after, like they have a worse memory in Polish, or like that, where like you forget the exact words that were used. Because that's super common. Like that happens in English too. You obviously that wasn't the right word. You frequently can't repeat exactly verbatim what was said, but you could summarize it and be like, I think what they said was this because I was listening. But if you like have a worse memory in Polish, that's a different thing, and you might be overestimating your actual comprehension.
Yeah, I went through a phase in this with Spanish where I would forget the meaning very quickly. And I don't know how long that phase lasted, but um, it is normal. And yes, you do overestimate how much you're understanding. If you can't summarize what the person said afterwards, you probably didn't fully understand what they said. The fact that it is not concrete in your mind, that it's still fuzzy, leads to you not being able to express that afterwards. So I'd say there's two things to consider. One of them is, and two ways to practice this. One of them is summary in your native language. So if you hear something in Polish, try and summarize it. You don't need to do like a verbatim translation or anything. So that will test your comprehension. And then there's a repeat after me version where you try to get the exact wording.
A repeat after you
And
version where you try to get the exact wording.
exactly.
Exactly.
And that tests your ability to A, retain the exact wording, or retain enough of the idea at a high enough level of fidelity that you can recreate the original wording because you know enough about the language.
Funny enough, a good way to practice this in writing is with copy work, because the idea is that you're trying to read a sentence or read as much as you can and then write that out as accurately as you can without like looking back at every single word. Because if you're just copying word like one word at a time, that's very easy. But if you're like, okay, I'm trying to read this whole sentence, keep it in my mind, then write it out, that's a slow way of practicing that.
Yeah.
But if you do the same thing speaking wise, it's the similar idea. And yeah, they
A
say
ton of
they
our clients love copy work. There's a whole group of clients that do this on a regular basis together.
I do it when I started doing it for travel stuff. Like if I want to just bring a book and a notebook, I can do copy work.
Yeah.
And so I definitely like it for that because I don't have to bring my computer or my phone. And it's like a good interactive immersion thing to do. So hot tip if you don't want to bring your phone everywhere or bring whatever. And Bree wrote an email on how to do copy work. That's really good.
Yeah, we haven't done a video about that yet, have we?
No.
That might be worth it.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Potentially like a spoken versus written. But I do think I have the link kind of handy because I sent it to a friend. Oh, I made it. It's refold.link/what is copy work that with dashes. I made a refold link for it because I am so smart. So smart.
Good job.
So if you go to this link, you can get a email breakdown of how to do copy work. And if you want these kinds of emails in your inbox, I would also recommend checking out our email list, which is on our main site. You can get on the email list.
You don't have a short link for that?
I do. I forget what it is though. It's like join mailing list.
Perfect.
I'm so glad I named these well. It's join mailing list, and we have a mailing list of a lot of interesting emails like this. Bree does a really good job at writing up just her experience or breaking down tutorials in written forms. It is sort of what I wish the blog was, if it was better like managed and whatnot. But email gets directly to people. Yeah,
just copy and paste.
I think we've done that actually for some, and even translated into Spanish. But yeah. Final question, just because it's easy. Who created Refold, Ethan? Who created it?
Matt vs. Japan and I were the founders, original founders. The guide, we also had support from Katrina. Yeah, Katrina. She helped to write a bunch of the copy for that. And yeah, so I'd say Matt and I were the definitely the founders, and then she helped with the initial writing of the guide.
And then afterwards? After the guide?
What do you mean?
Well, there's the whole. Now we do different things with the whole core team.
Oh, I thought you were asking who founded the company.
It says who created Refold. That's the entire question.
Oh, well, the initial company was founded by me and Matt, and then there have been hundreds of people that have contributed, but the core team is Ben, Luna, Nahom, Clayton, and Bree. And then we have a bunch of contractors like Zena and Jen and Jafar and tons of people. Hibure, exactly. And then we've got a ton of moderators and volunteers that help with the community. And so I'd say, and then we got tons of people like contributing to crowdsource documents. So really like everyone involved in Refold helped to create Refold because
viewers like you
created Refold. Yeah. And if you bought one of our products, you also helped to create Refold because you funded our salary so we can continue to work on the project.
You paid Kinkibide's rent and for his cat litter indirectly. All right, that's enough of this nonsense. You have anything else you want to say before we wrap things up here?
I am all good. Thanks everybody for showing up and watching us live. We always love talking to you. Don't forget to drop your questions in the Discord channel. Or email them to us or get them to us somehow. And we'll see you for the next
signals. One. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.
Hi, help.
We're done. Now you don't mute.
No, I'm not on stream.
Okay, excellent connection.
My recording is uploaded.
Mine is too. Oh, it caught your cough on stream.
Oh no.